On a bustling street corner, the city's chaos swirled around as Rachel Bennett's voice cut through the noise, raw with desperation and determination. The streets were alive with honking cars, the chatter of passers-by, and the occasional distant wail of a siren. But Rachel's song rose above it all. Her powerful, trembling notes carried the weight of a mother's love and the unimaginable fear of losing her child. Clutched tightly in her arms was her 3-year-old son, Daniel, his tiny body frail against hers. His pale cheeks and tired eyes spoke volumes about his condition, yet his small hand held onto his mother's shirt as if anchoring himself to her strength. Rachel's other hand gripped a sign, its bold, hand-scrawled letters screaming a plea to anyone who cared to read, "Save my son." Each lyric Rachel sang was filled with her soul, but the crowd flowed around her, indifferent. Some tossed a few coins or small bills into the open guitar case at her feet, while others averted their eyes, hurrying past. Rachel's voice wavered momentarily as she glanced at the meager collection of money in the case. It wasn't nearly enough, and she fought back the tears threatening to choke her performance. This was her lifeline, her only way to raise the money needed for Daniel's life-saving treatment. Unbeknownst to Rachel, a sleek black Cadillac had pulled over a short distance away. Inside sat Marcus Carter, a seasoned and influential music producer known for discovering talent in the most unexpected places. His silver-rimmed sunglasses reflected the scene as he leaned slightly forward, intrigued. There was something raw, something untamed and real in Rachel's voice that captivated him. Marcus, a man who had seen it all in the music industry, felt a strange pull in his chest. He wasn't the type to stop for street performers. His world was polished stages and award ceremonies. But something about Rachel's desperate passion spoke to him. He stepped out of the car, his sharp black shoes clicking against the pavement, and folded his arms as he watched her perform. Rachel, lost in her song, hadn't noticed the man who now stood among the small group of onlookers. Marcus's presence exuded authority and calm, his tailored charcoal suit a sharp contrast to Rachel's faded jeans and simple blouse. He studied her, not just her voice but the story written in her every movement. There was no doubt she had talent, but it was the urgency in her song that pierced through to him. As her performance ended, Rachel's voice broke with exhaustion. She cradled Daniel closer, planting a kiss on his forehead. Her eyes scanned the sparse donations in the guitar case, disappointment evident in her face. The crowd dispersed quickly, leaving her alone with her son and her worry. It was then that Marcus stepped forward, his shadow falling over the open guitar case. Rachel glanced up, startled, her tired eyes meeting his steady gaze. "Your voice," Marcus began, his deep voice carrying an air of authority, "has something special, but it's more than that. There's a story behind it, isn't there?" Rachel blinked, unsure how to respond. She tightened her grip on Daniel and straightened, suddenly wary. "I'm just trying to save my son," she said simply, her voice raw with honesty. Marcus crouched slightly to Daniel's level, offering the child a small, warm smile. Then he looked back at Rachel. "What if I told you I could help? Not just with money, but with something bigger? You've got something the world needs to hear. Let me give you the platform to tell it." Rachel stared at him, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. But just as quickly, doubt crept in. Who was this man, and could she really trust him? Still, something in his voice felt genuine, like he truly wanted to help. "Why?" Rachel finally asked, her voice trembling. "Why would you care?" Marcus straightened, adjusting his suit jacket. "Because sometimes the world needs to hear stories like yours, and sometimes people like me are in the position to make sure it happens." He pulled out a sleek business card, handing it to her. "Call me when you're ready." Rachel took the card hesitantly, her fingers trembling slightly as she read his name and contact information. Marcus Carter. She tucked it into her pocket as he turned and walked back to his car. The Cadillac pulled away smoothly, leaving Rachel standing there, clutching Daniel and the weight of a decision that could change everything. As the evening settled in and the city lights began to glow, Rachel's thoughts raced. Could she dare to believe that help had finally arrived? Or was this just another fleeting hope in her fight to save her son? The sterile silence of the children's hospital was like a heavy blanket, smothering every sound and emotion. Rachel sat stiffly in a bright consultation room, her hands clutching Daniel close to her chest. The room's colorful animal decals on the white walls felt like a cruel mockery of the somber atmosphere. The sharp contrast between their cheerful grins and the weight in Rachel's heart made the space feel even colder. Daniel, oblivious to the tension, quietly played with his threadbare teddy bear. The toy, once plush and new, was now a faded remnant of comfort in their stormy reality. Across from her sat Dr. Olivia Green, the pediatric oncologist whose presence exuded both authority and compassion. Her kind eyes, framed by the graying streaks in her hair, softened the gravity of what she was about to say. Her desk was a chaotic array of medical charts, scan results, and notes, each a grim puzzle piece of Daniel's condition. Rachel's stomach churned as Dr. Green began to speak. "Rachel," she said gently, her gaze steady but sorrowful. "The results from Daniel's latest tests confirm what we feared." She paused, as if bracing herself. "It's stage 4 neuroblastoma." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The words felt like daggers slicing through her resolve. Her grip on Daniel tightened instinctively, and for a moment, the bustling world outside seemed to fade into silence. "Stage 4, she whispered, her voice breaking. Dr. Green nodded solemnly. "The cancer has spread from his adrenal gland to parts of his left kidney. It's advanced." She picked up a scan from her desk and held it to the light. Grainy shadows and shapes filled the image, incomprehensible to Rachel's untrained eye. "Here," Dr. Green said, pointing to the darkened areas, "is where the disease has progressed." Rachel leaned forward, her heart pounding as she tried to make sense of the gray maze before her. She felt lost, as if staring into a foreign map without any hope of finding her way out. What does this mean for him?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "How long?" The question hung in the air, unfinished, as if saying the words aloud would make them more real. Dr. Green set the scan down and folded her hands on the desk. "Rachel," she said softly, "I want to be honest with you. Without aggressive intervention, Daniel may have 6 months, possibly up to a year." The words hit Rachel like a tidal wave, knocking the air from her lungs. Her arms instinctively wrapped around Daniel, shielding him as though her love alone could protect him from the cruel reality. The little boy, sensing his mother's distress, looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. "Mama," he murmured, his small voice cutting through the thick silence. Rachel forced a smile, stroking his bald head gently. "It's okay, sweetie," she whispered, her voice shaking as tears welled up in her eyes. But it wasn't okay, not even close. Dr. Green's voice softened further, a glimmer of hope lacing her words. "However," she said, "there is a path forward. With surgery and immunotherapy, there's a chance, possibly a significant one, that Daniel could achieve remission. We've made remarkable strides in treatments for neuroblastoma in recent years." Rachel clung to those words like a lifeline. When can we start?" she asked quickly, her voice filled with a desperate urgency. Dr. Green hesitated, her expression shifting. Concern clouded her eyes. "Rachel, we've had this discussion before. I have to ask, what's stopping you from moving forward with the treatment?" Rachel's composure, fragile as glass, shattered. Tears streamed down her face as she finally voiced the burden she had been carrying for so long. "Our insurance," she began, her voice cracking. "It only covers the basics, chemotherapy, diagnostic tests, the surgery and immunotherapy." She shook her head, her words trailing off as she struggled to hold herself together. "I can't afford it. I've been working every job I can find, but it's not enough." The absence of her late husband, David, loomed over her like a shadow. If he were alive, they might have been able to manage, but as a single mother juggling multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads, the cost of Daniel's advanced treatment was an insurmountable mountain. Dr. Green's face softened with understanding. "I see," she said quietly. "Rachel, I can't begin to imagine how difficult this is for you, but I want you to know that we're not giving up. We'll continue with the basic chemotherapy to give Daniel the best chance possible under these circumstances." She paused, her voice resolute. "And I promise you, we'll explore every option available." Rachel nodded, her gratitude mingling with helplessness. She knew Dr. Green meant every word, but the weight of her situation was crushing. The doctor rose from her chair and walked around the desk, placing a reassuring hand on Rachel's shoulder. "Rachel," she said firmly, "Daniel is a fighter, and we'll fight right alongside him." As Rachel looked up at Dr. Green, her tears flowing freely, she felt a faint flicker of hope. It wasn't enough to erase the fear or the pain, but it was something, a glimmer in the darkness. When she stepped out of the consultation room, Daniel still in her arms, Rachel's resolve hardened. She had to find a way. Somehow, she would save her son. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the busy street corner, the hum of city life serving as a backdrop to Rachel's desperate performance. Her voice, raw with emotion, echoed through the air as she sang, clutching her 3-year-old son, Daniel, in her arms. The cardboard sign at her feet read, "Save my son," in bold, uneven letters, a simple plea that encapsulated her unbearable reality. Daniel, too exhausted to lift his head, rested against her shoulder, his tiny hand clutching his tattered teddy bear. His frail body was a constant reminder of the time slipping through her fingers. Passers-by glanced at her, some with pity, others with indifference, but Rachel didn't care. She poured every ounce of her soul into her voice, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would hear her. A sleek black Cadillac slowed to a stop just a few feet away. Inside, Marcus King, a renowned music producer known for his sharp instincts and even sharper tongue, watched the scene unfold. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit and aviator sunglasses, Marcus exuded an aura of power and authority. He had built his career by recognizing talent where others saw none, but today, something deeper stirred within him as he listened to Rachel's heartfelt performance. Rachel, oblivious to Marcus's presence, sang with her eyes closed, her voice trembling but unwavering. It wasn't just a song. It was a cry for help, a mother's unrelenting fight for her child's survival. As the final note hung in the air, Rachel opened her eyes, her chest heaving. Her gaze fell on the sparse collection of coins and bills in the open guitar case at her feet. It wasn't nearly enough. "Hey!" a deep voice called out, startling Rachel. She looked up to see Marcus stepping out of his car, his imposing figure striding toward her. For a moment, she froze, unsure whether to feel alarmed or hopeful. "That was," Marcus began, pulling off his sunglasses to reveal piercing eyes that seemed to look straight into her soul. "That was something else." Rachel blinked, confused. I'm just trying to raise money for my son's treatment," she stammered, clutching Daniel tighter. Marcus's gaze shifted to the boy in her arms. His expression softened, the hardened exterior of a man accustomed to cutthroat business momentarily giving way to something more human. "What's his name?" he asked. "Daniel," Rachel replied, her voice breaking. He's battling cancer. I'm trying to afford the treatment, but—" Her words trailed off as a wave of emotion overtook her. Marcus studied her for a long moment, his mind racing. He had heard countless sob stories in his career, but this felt different. It wasn't just the raw talent in Rachel's voice. It was the sheer weight of her love and determination. "I've heard a lot of singers in my time," Marcus said finally, his voice low, "but none of them sang like their life depended on it. You do." He gestured toward his car. "Come with me." Rachel recoiled slightly, her instincts screaming caution. "Why? Who are you?" "Marcus King," he said simply, as if the name alone should answer all her questions. "I'm a music producer, and I'm offering you a chance, not just for you, but for him," he added, nodding toward Daniel. "Come to my studio. Let's see what you can really do." Rachel hesitated, torn between fear and hope. This could be the opportunity she had been praying for, but could she trust him? She glanced down at Daniel, his pale face nestled against her shoulder. She had no choice. For him, she would take the risk. "All right," she said quietly, "but I can't be away for too long. He needs me." Marcus nodded. "Understood. Bring him with you." The drive to Marcus's studio was a blur. Rachel sat in the back seat with Daniel, her mind racing. She had heard stories about people in the music industry both inspiring and horrifying. But as she looked at her son, she resolved to see this through. It wasn't about her. It was about giving him a chance to live. The studio was a sleek, modern space filled with state-of-the-art equipment. Rachel's nerves threatened to overwhelm her as she stepped inside, but Marcus's calm demeanor steadied her. He motioned toward the recording booth. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Rachel took a deep breath and stepped into the booth. The microphone loomed before her, a silent challenge. She closed her eyes and began to sing, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with each note. The song was a lullaby she had often sung to Daniel on sleepless nights, a melody filled with love and heartache. From the control room, Marcus listened intently, his experienced ears picking up on every nuance. There was something extraordinary in her voice, an authenticity that couldn't be taught or manufactured. He leaned forward, a rare smile spreading across his face. This wasn't just a mother fighting for her child. This was a star in the making. When the final note faded, Rachel stepped out of the booth, her hands shaking. Was that okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stood, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he clapped, slow, deliberate applause that filled the room. "Okay," he repeated. "Rachel, that was phenomenal." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt seen. Not as a struggling mother or a woman on the brink, but as someone with worth and potential. "I'll make you a deal," Marcus said, his voice firm. "We'll record an album. I'll cover the costs of production and promotion. In return, I want half the profits." Rachel's heart leaped. You're serious?" "Dead serious," Marcus replied. "But understand this. I'm not doing this out of charity. You've got real talent, Rachel. I'm investing in you because I believe in you." Rachel nodded, overwhelmed but determined. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. As she left the studio that night, Daniel asleep in her arms, Rachel felt a spark of hope reignite within her. The road ahead would still be difficult, but for the first time in months, it felt like there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and she was ready to fight for it with everything she had.